The product of two numbers is obtained when you take one number and you multiply it times another number. Now, just in case you're not familiar with multiplication at this point in the course, you can basically think of multiplication as repeated addition. For example, if you had something like 3 times 6, this is multiplication. This is a product of 3 and 6. You're basically going to take 6 and add it to itself again and again and again, a total of 3 times. So 6 plus 6 plus 6. That's 6 added to itself 3 times. That's where we get 3 times 6. This would give you a total of 18. And so we would say that the product of 3 and 6 equals 18. All right, now how do we write products? Well, usually they're written in one of two ways in an algebra class. You can either use just a dot between the two numbers. For example, you could say 4 times 7 is 28, or you could use parentheses instead of a dot. You could say, something like 3 times 5, and the 5 is in parentheses. 3 times 5 is equal to 15, let's say. So these are the most common ways to indicate a product. Now, if you remember from years back earlier in your schooling, you may have initially learned multiplication with the little x. We're going to try to move away from that notation. For example, we might say if we want to do 3 times 4, we would write 3, the little time symbol, and a 4. And of course, this is equal to 12. But we're going to try to move away from using that notation, because in our algebra class, this could be easily confused with the letter x, which is called a variable. So we would rather stick to either using the dot or the parentheses to indicate multiplication. Now, the last thing I'll say, this is mostly just a little word of caution here. If you had something to the effect of 9 times negative 5, it's very tempting to read this as 9 minus 5. But because that negative 5 is in parentheses, that means it's actually the quantity negative 5 times 9. It's not subtraction, it's multiplication with a negative. So this would be negative 45. Now, speaking of positives times negatives and so on, let's actually look at some rules. The sign of your answer actually depends on whether you're multiplying a positive times a positive, or a positive times a negative, or any combination of a positive times a negative times a positive or a negative. So let's look at these rules here. If you have a positive number times another positive number, your answer will be positive. If you have a negative number times a positive number, your answer will be negative. If you have a positive times a negative, the reverse is also true. You still get a negative answer. And if you have a negative times a negative, the double negatives actually negate each other, and you actually get a positive answer here. All right, let's try a few examples and practice a few. Let's say we had 2 times 3. 2 times 3, that's a positive times a positive. We would get a positive 6. Let's say we had negative 4 times negative 5. That's a negative times a negative. Our answer will be a positive 20. Let's say we had 3 times negative 10. That's a positive times a negative. You would get a negative 30. And last one, let's say we had negative 7 times 5. For example, this would give you a negative 35. So we have all these different combinations, and the sign of our answer depends on the signs of the numbers that we were taking the product of. All right, now I'm going to give you a strong recommendation here. To be successful in an algebra class, you're going to be working through a lot of these problems, and you can't be worried about doing the arithmetic on your fingers or in the calculator, especially things like multiplication. The better that you know multiplication, the more brain power you will have freed up to focus on the problem at hand. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to memorize what's called a multiplication table through 12 times 12. And a multiplication table looks like this. You have 1 through 12 on a column and 1 through 12 along a row. And then as you match up these entries, you're going to put the product of those two numbers. For example, 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. And then if you did a column, 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 1 is 2. 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4. So you put that in the row and column where these guys meet. 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 times 3 is 9. You would continue this out in all directions until you get it to 12 times 12. For most algebra students, if you know through 12 times 12 and you can immediately reply with any number through 12 times any number through 12, you will be much ahead of the curve. And like I said, you'll wind up doing better in the course because you're not worried about the arithmetic. I should be able to ask you right now, what is 9 times 8? And you should be able to say 72 with no thinking about it, no calculator, no fingers or anything like that. So learn your multiplication tables, practice it, practice it, practice it. Make sure you have the rules down for your signs of your products, and you should be pretty good to go.